They say a man's past doesn't matter on the plains. That you can outrun it out here, let it die in the wind like yesterday's sins. But some men, they carry it in their bones. Every step they take kicks up the dust of everything they've survived. He came walking down that dirt road with the morning sun biting his back and blood on his lips, though no one could see it. His boots were so thin, the rocks cut right through. His wrists still bore the rusted chains, not long gone. He was 30, maybe older, maybe just looked that way from a lifetime without mercy. Nobody in town knew his name. Nobody asked, seen. Cuts to an old rancher, mid-60s, sitting on the porch of his crumbling barn, staring at unpaid bills piled high and cattle thin as ribs. Thomas Aldrich was dying. Not of sickness, of slow, dry failure. A good man with nothing left but land and ghosts. His wife gone, his sons buried too young. He didn't expect help, didn't pray for it. But when the man with shackled wrists walked up and said, "I can work," Thomas didn't ask questions either. He just looked him up and down, bones sharp, eyes hollow, and nodded once. "You sleep in the shed?" the rancher said. "If you steal, you run. If you work, you stay." The man only nodded. He hadn't spoken a full sentence in years. Voice softens as the narrator scribes the days that follow. The first days were quiet, just the rhythm of broken fences, the creak of a rusty gate, the wheeze of cattle too thin to cry. The stranger never complained. He rose before dawn, worked until dark, and ate whatever scraps the rancher left out. He never asked for pay, never spoke of his past, and never took off his shirt. But at night, Thomas would see him out by the well, scrubbing his arms like he was trying to wash something off that water couldn't touch. One night, the rancher asked him, "What's your name?" The man hesitated. Dan said, "They called me Boy, my whole life. Just Boy." Thomas lit his pipe and nodded. "Then I'll call you Eli." The man blinked. Short for Elisha. In the Bible, Elisha followed the prophet Elijah, walked alone. For a long time, weren't easy. The man said nothing. But the next day, when Thomas called Eli, he turned his head. Cut to a flashback. A filthy factory basement. Children hammering iron under torchlight. A boy no older than 6 being handed to a man in a suit. Eli had been sold at 6, not adopted, not fostered. Sold to a man who owned mines, factories, rail tunnels, and children. They worked in silence, slept in crates. Once a day. If they cried, they were whipped. If they stopped working, they were buried behind the furnace. Survived because he never stopped moving. But scars don't disappear with age. They thicken, they deepen, and the silence becomes part of the flesh. By 30, he'd escaped, not by freedom, by fire. The factory had burned, and with it, the man who owned him. But Eli didn't celebrate. He just walked. 4 days, then weeks, then months, till he found the ranch. Back to the present. The ranch is slowly coming back to life. Cattle fed, tastes, fences mended. Thomas watching Eli from a distance. "You've saved this place, you know," Thomas said one evening, tossing him a half bottle of whiskey. Eli caught it, but didn't drink. "I didn't know you could rebuild a ranch with just one man in his." Silence. Eli stared at the horizon, then said softly, "It's easier than rebuilding a soul." Thomas didn't respond. Just watch the wind carry those words into the dusk. But the past don't die easy, especially not Eli's, because someone, somewhere, knew he'd survived the fire. And that someone had no intention of letting him stay free. Not now, not ever. And as the first snow fell on the roof of that little ranch, a letter arrived. No name, just a mark burned into the paper. The same brand Eli still had seared onto his back. The fire that freed Eli didn't take his soul. but it burned his past into the skin of his back. A brand shaped like an iron H inside a circle. It meant something once, a symbol of ownership, of property, of cruelty with a signature. Thomas. I hadn't asked till that letter came. The paper was thick and yellowed, sealed with wax, but it carried no name. It's just the same H branded on its surface, a mark meant to stir memory, its fear and obedience. Eli held the letter in his calloused hands. Didn't open it, didn't need to. They found me, he said. Thomas leaned on the doorframe, a rifle leaning beside him. Who's they? Eli looked up, eyes empty. It's the ones who think they still own me. Flashback to 15 years ago. Man in a fine coat walks down a row of children working in the mud, pointing at one boy after another. Guards with clubs behind him. K. Tall figure stands behind the man, face hidden, the only one not smiling. This is Mr. Hawthorne, a railroad baron who didn't build tracks, but bled lives into the dirt to make them. They called it Hawthorne Industries, Eli murmured. But it was just slavery in a different shape. K. They kept the workers underground. No sunlight, no names, just bruises and numbers. I stayed alive because I didn't scream. The ones who did vanished. Back on the ranch, the snow kept falling. But Eli was no longer just a man with a job. He was a man being hunted. I can leave, Eli told the rancher. They won't come for you if I'm gone. Thomas stared at the fire for a long time. You really think I took you in just to let them take you back? He said, finally. I've buried sons, fought wolves, watched drought tear my land in two. But I've never stood by while a good man was dragged back into hell. He walked across the room, lifted the old lever-action rifle from its place above the mantel, and set it beside Eli. If they come, we'll meet M together. The days that followed were tense. Horses restless, crows circling the skies like omens. Eli began checking the fences more often, rising even earlier. But he stayed, not because he trusted the land, but because it was the first place that didn't want to own him. And then came the man in the black coat. He rode into town like smoke, on a black stallion with red eyes and silver hooves. The sheriff wouldn't meet his gaze. The saloon went quiet the moment his boots touched the floor. His name was Luther Cray, a bounty broker, lawyer, and executioner, all rolled into one, paid by men like Hawthorne to retrieve what was lost. He pinned a paper on the sheriff's wall. Eli Asset Number 243B, property of Hawthorne Holdings. Reward, $10,000, alive only. The sheriff swallowed hard. He ain't property no more. Luther smiled. Everything's property to someone, and I always collect. Back at the ranch, Thomas and Eli were fixing a broken gate when the rider came to the fence line. He didn't speak, just held up the wanted paper. Eli's eyes locked with the man's. A wind cut between them, cold and sharp. You got 2 days, the man said. Turn him in, or I ride through. He turned and galloped away, dust rising behind him like storm smoke. That night, Eli sat alone in the barn. He unbuttoned his shirt and stared into a cracked mirror. The brand on his back still glowed faint. In the lantern light, like it remembered the fire, Thomas walked in, carrying 2 cups of hot coffee. Sat beside him. They'll burn this place down, Eli said. Then let it burn, the rancher answered. It's just wood and nails, but you're flesh and soul. And I ain't letting that be stolen again. Cut to flashback. A younger Eli, no older than 10, hiding a scrap of bread under a plank so another child could eat. A guard catches him and beats him bloody. The other child screams as Eli is dragged away. The child's face is familiar. Almost too familiar. Back in the barn, Eli clenched his jaw. They took everything. My name, my voice, my childhood. They turned us into shadows, but I'm done running. He stood up, staring out toward the hills. If he comes back, I'll be ready, okay? And in the shadows, out beyond the ridge, Cray was already watching the ranch through a brass spyglass. His gloves tight around the hilt of his knife. They always make it harder than it has to be, he whispered. Behind him stood the hired guns, rifles loaded, faces hidden behind scarves and wide-brimmed hats. One of them was barely more than a boy, but his eyes burned like Eli's had once burned, full of silence and rage. The past had not just returned, it had brought back up. The wind cut sharper now. The ranch stood still under a sky the color of iron. Every animal sensed what was coming. So did the men. There's a kind of silence that comes before a storm. It's not the soft kind. It's a kind that tastes like blood on the tongue and smells like gunpowder on old wood. For 2 days, Eli and Thomas worked in silence. They boarded up windows, moved cattle to the lower fields, reinforced the barn. Not because they thought they could stop what was coming, but because men like Eli don't run. Not anymore. You ever killed a man? Thomas asked one night, as they shared a plate of beans over the fire. Eli stared into the flames. Only once. The day I escaped. Thomas nodded. You might have to remember how. Cut to Cray's camp. The bounty man sits beside a roaring fire, sharpening a long, curved blade. The 2 hired guns watch from the shadows. One of them, the younger one, studies the ranch through a scope. You sure this is the one? He asks. Cray doesn't. Look up. Same eyes, same brand, same silence. The younger gun lowers the scope. He's just a man. No, Cray replies coldly. He's a loose investment, and I collect what's owed. It's flashback to 20 years earlier. Eli, age 10, is chained to a pipe in a sweat-soaked room. Beside him, another boy, younger, weaker, sobs quietly. I'll protect you, Eli whispers. Don't talk. Just sleep. The other boy nods, trusting. But by morning, boy was gone, taken, vanished, like so many before. Back in the present, Eli stands outside the barn at midnight. Snow falls in thick, slow flakes. He hears footsteps, turns. Thomas stands behind him, shotgun in hand, wrapped in a wool coat. You don't have to stay, Eli says. Thomas answers, neither do you. Yet, here we are. That morning, a rider appears on the ridge. It's Cray. Alone. He holds up a white cloth in one hand, a false peace. Eli walks out, rifle slung across his back, no fear in his steps. They meet at the fence line. You could have stayed gone, Cray says. You burned the factory. I bet should have been enough. You mean I burned the prison? Eli corrects. Cray smiles without warmth. You think this land gives a damn about justice? You are property, Eli. And property don't get to rewrite the rules. I'm not property now. No, Cray says. But your leverage. Someone wants you real bad. Set to bring you back breathing. But didn't say how broken. Thomas appears beside Eli, shotgun raised. He ain't going anywhere. Cray narrows his eyes. You're gonna get your ranch torched over a runaway. Thomas spits on the ground. It's not the first thing I've had to rebuild. Cray tips his hat, turns his horse. You chose fire. Then, that night, Eli dreams of the boy from the factory. The one who trusted him. The one who disappeared. He wakes in a cold sweat. There's something he's not remembering. Someone. The attack comes just before dawn. Not with guns first, but with fire. The barn erupts in flames. Cattle stampede in the darkness. Screams echo into the hills. Eli and Thomas run into the chaos. Rifles drawn, eyes sharp. Cray's men come through the smoke, guns flashing. One is taken down by Thomas with a blast of buckshot. The other, the younger one, hesitates when he sees Eli face to face. They stare at each other, and in that frozen second, Eli sees something. A scar under the boy's eye. A thin white line. His breath catches. Flashback again. The sobbing boy. The scar. The one Eli swore to protect. No, Eli whispers. Is it you? The young gun's hands shake. I thought you were dead, Eli says. The boy, now a man, lifts his rifle. Tears in his eyes. I was, until Cray found me. He doesn't pull the trigger. Instead, he runs, disappears into the trees, leaving his gun behind. Eli turns, just in time to see Cray standing behind Thomas. Gun aimed. Don't move. Cray growls. Thomas glares. Do it, and you won't leave this ranch alive. Cray smirks. I don't plan to. But I never leave a job unfinished. A shot rings out. Cray stumbles. Not from Thomas. Not from Eli. From behind, the young gun. The boy from the past had returned. Cray drops, coughing blood, eyes wide in disbelief. You were supposed to be mine. He wheezes. The young man shakes his head. You never owned anything. Eli kneels beside Cray as the man dies. I'm not property, Eli says again. And this time, he believes it. Later, the ranch smolders and dawn breaks across the frost-covered hills. Thomas and Eli sit on the porch, shoulders bruised, eyes tired. What now? Thomas asks. Eli looks to the horizon. I think I start remembering who I really was, before the chains. But out there, beyond the hills, word is already spreading that a man once sold into silence had found his voice, and that voice was starting to echo. Fade in. The ranch is quiet now. Smoke rises gently from the blackened barn. The snow is melting into ash. A wind carries the smell of something that tried to die, but didn't. There's a strange peace that comes after the storm, a kind that don't make noise, just sits beside you, heavy and still. Eli had felt pain, fire, hunger, but never peace until now. Cray was dead. The hired guns had scattered, and the boy, the one from his past, had left behind more than a bullet. He'd left behind a question. What are you now, Eli? Not property, not slave, not a shadow, just a man. King, for the first time. Free Thomas was slow to heal. The wound in his shoulder still burned, but he didn't complain. The ranch had known worse, and he had something now he hadn't had in years. Company, purpose, hope. You gonna stay? He asked Eli one morning as they repaired the chicken coop that had been crushed by stampeding horses. Eli nodded. I'm tired of running, but freedom has a cost. And Eli knew his story wasn't over, because word spreads fast in the West, faster than wind. And when a man once owned burns down his master, fights off a bounty hunter, and walks away breathing, others take notice. Scene. Shift, a polished office, far away, city skyline in the distance. A man in a black vest receives a telegram, reads it slowly. Cray's dead, he mutters. He turns to the mirror, adjusts his tie. Prepare the files. We'll need lawyers. This time, quiet ones. Back at the ranch. Eli finds the young man again, the boy from the factory. His name is Jonah. He returns, not with violence, but shame and questions. I followed Cray because I had nothing else. He promised me I'd matter. You always mattered, Eli says. You saved me once, Jonah replies. Let me do the same for you now. And so they rebuild together. Not just wood and nails, but the pieces of their own broken selves. They plant new fences, parry the past, literally and figuratively. Cray's body goes into the earth beneath the dying sycamore tree. No marker, no prayer, silence. The same silence he forced onto others. One evening, Eli pulls out a torn notebook he'd hidden in the loft of the barn. Side, sketches, half memories, names of children he remembered from the factory. Some had vanished. Some were dead. But some might still be alive. I want to find them, he tells Thomas. Tell them we made it, that they can too. Thomas smiles faintly. Then that's what you'll do. Eli hesitates. I can't leave you alone here. You won't. Thomas says, you'll come back. And so, when spring breaks over the hills, Eli rides out, with Jonah beside him. Two men once caged, now on the trail not for vengeance, but for healing. Every town they pass, they leave word. Every face they see, they study, searching for fragments of the past, for survivors. Montage, slow and poetic. A letter slipped under a church door with names written on it. A coin dropped into the hand of a beggar who once carried coal in the mines. A hug shared between two grown men who hadn't seen each other since they were boys in chains. Back on the ranch, Thomas waits. He feeds the cattle, mends the roof, watches the road. One day, he sees dust rising. Not just one rider, 3 to Eli, Jonah, and a young woman with eyes like steel, one of the lost, now found. They ride slow. Ride free. Eli dismounts, walks up the porch, and nods. Once, I found more, he says. And there's still more out there. Thomas looks around. Then we better start building. Final scene. The ranch. Years later. The barn is rebuilt. It's bigger now, full of life. Horses, children, laughter. It's not a sound Eli grew up with, but one he learned to love. A wooden sign hangs above the gate. Home for the broken, shelter for the free. And under it, carved in rough letters, we are not property. Narrator, final words. Eli was sold at 6, beaten until 30, but in the end, he found something no money could buy. A home, a name, a purpose, and a chance to give others what he was never given, a second beginning.